What's up, everybody? I'm John Middlekauff. You know what I need you to do. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We got content for days reacting to every NFL game all the time, every single day. Subscribe, like the videos. Let's go. Okay, let's go to college football, as we like to call it, Kauff on campus. When's the last time I've been on a campus? I guess last year I went to the Fresno State game. Fresno State killed them, which probably wouldn't happen this year because Arizona State's a lot better. But I, like many people, usually get up pretty early on Saturday nights. The older you get, you don't drink as much, and you can wake up at like 6 or 7 a.m. on Saturday and Sunday pretty easily. And I get up and I walk right out to the living room and I turn on College Game Day. And it was cool. From Bloomington, Indiana, Cignetti. And obviously Cignetti's been all over social media. His team's been awesome. I've watched them play. I didn't believe in them going into that Nebraska game. That game, having money on Nebraska, made me a believer. Watched them again against Washington with their backup quarterback. Kick ass and take names. They are fantastic. It is, regardless of the story, like they're a really good team. Like, that's a real college football team in terms of, like, if they make the playoffs, it's not some fluke. That team has they're really good on defense. But I was texting with someone the other day, like, and I saw a clip where Cignetti says, listen, right now I got everything I want here. My wife likes it. They have supported the program. We've had money for NIL. And obviously we've had success in this, the second best conference in the country in the Big Ten. But what if people call him this offseason? What if other bigger jobs, let's say Florida, they open up and they call Curt Cignetti? And most people go, well, it's like, you got to take the job. Because historically, 100%. Now with NIL and the transfer portal, it is clearly, I would say, leveled the playing field. Still have a huge advantage at 4 or 5 of the big boys. You're coaching Ohio State, you're coaching at Georgia, you're coaching at LSU, you're coaching at Texas or Texas A&M. You're going to get better players. You're going to have more money behind you. Your recruiting bases are better. Not even debatable. But I looked today, both of his coordinators, Mike Shanahan is his offensive coordinator, no relation, who graduated college in 2012, played football at Pitt. So he's a younger guy. Their defensive coordinator, Bryant Haynes, is probably my age. We graduated college same year, 2008. So he's 39, 40 years old. Are they going to be able to keep their two coordinators? Because historically, no chance. And what do most college coaches do when they need an OC or a DC? They look around to the best teams in the country that aren't Texas or Ohio State or Alabama that can afford to keep their guys. And they poach. So if you're Curt Cignetti, like right now, you already realize my two coordinators, which came with me from James Madison, who are two young, trajectory pointing straight up at the sky type guys, can we pay them $1.52 million? Because that's what happens sometimes. 2 years ago, Nick Saban tried to hire Ryan Grubb away from Kalen DeBoer, which was ironic because then DeBoer ended up becoming Alabama, brought Grubb, but then he lost him to the Seattle Seahawks. But the point was, Alabama offered him more money than they could pay him. But he chose to stay, partly because he was loyal. He thought they had a good team and ultimately made the right decision. But typically in these situations, you saw it last year with UCLA. One of the reasons Chip Kelly just mailed it in on that program is like Lincoln Riley and USC wanted his defensive coordinator. And they could just pay him more money. And they did, and he left. So if you're Cignetti, even if you really like it, you go, two factors here. Is it sustainable what we're doing? Like every year, like they're not going to expect me to win 10, 11 games every year. But can I consistently win 8, 9? Am I going to be able to get the recruits here? And only he truly knows that, being in it every day. But 2, like, am I going to be able to keep my coaches? Because watching Cignetti talk, he's pretty confident. He believes in his ability. And his resume, as he said, Google me, is impressive. He wins. But it is difficult if you just factor in over a 5-year period to sustain what he's doing. Penn State's really good now. Michigan is not going to be this shitty for long. You add Oregon to the conference. Listen, the USC thing has been a debacle. They're not going to be this bad. Ohio State's always elite. And then just playing the random Wisconsins, Iowas, Minnesota, like it's hard. And I just use Florida because that's probably the easiest one to pinpoint of a team that could open that is just a hard job to turn down. That if they do call, how do you not seriously consider it? Or just plug in any job opening with that type cachet. And I think he's going to have a very, very tough decision on his hands. Because if I was an AD at one of these bigger schools and we fire our coach, he has to be one of my first calls. He really does. And if you're him, as it gets louder and louder of people coming after his coordinators, because just pick the top 10 teams in the country. LSU, Ohio State, Michigan, Texas A&M. Like, if they need a coordinator on one of the sides of the ball, wouldn't you look immediately to Indiana and go, hey, what are you making? Oh, I make $1 million. Hey, we'll give you 2. That's usually what happens. Penn State, Ohio State is a massive game this weekend. And I watched a decent amount of Penn State play Wisconsin on Saturday night on NBC, which is kind of weird. Some of these, I get the TV contracts change. Like, it's weird to me that the SEC is no longer on CBS and it's on ABC. I think if you're CBS, I don't know how you screwed that up. Obviously, your number one priority 24/7, 365 is the NFL. But the level of television ratings that the SEC is doing this year has to hurt them. But Penn State, Ohio State is, going to do 10 million people are going to watch this game. And Ohio State right now is in shambles. They've lost several left tackles. They can't run the ball, which I would say is not necessarily normal for a Chip Kelly team. And defensively, they just don't look as powerful as they have, obviously, in the Urban Meyer era. That has kind of been one of the downfalls of Ryan Day, is his defense just haven't been as good. And I've always thought when you have offensive coaches, especially offensive coaches who are inclined to throw the ball a lot, it's hard to develop toughness. And especially most offensive guys, former quarterbacks or guys that coach the quarterback, aren't typically innately tough. Right? Jim Harbaugh, former quarterback, is an outlier. If you asked a 25-year-old football fan that had never watched Jim Harbaugh play, and you said, this guy played in the NFL, what position do you think Jim Harbaugh played in the NFL? If you didn't know anything about him, you just liked NFL football, you're too young to remember him playing, you don't remember him as a player, I think most people would guess like linebacker, like middle linebacker, safety, tight end. You would not guess quarterback. John Harbaugh, Dan Campbell, Mike Tomlin, these guys are crazy. And that's good. It's why their teams are physical, because you can't fake that shit. Andy Reid played offensive line. He's a tough guy, even though he likes to throw the ball. But at his core, like, offensive line is his baby. We'll put him on the map as a coach way back in the day. So when you tell me that, Sark got shoved around by Kirby, of course he did. Kirby's a crazy SOB. Safety, Georgia, tough guy, Saban mentor on defense. Like, that's his baby. Toughness, craziness, physicality. You can't fake it. Some coaches, it's harder for offensive quarterback, wide receiver type coaches to have that. It just is. And like, you watch Ohio State, no one disputes, and people, I bet there's people listening that know their roster a lot better than me. $20 million roster. They have NFL guys at every position. But like, are you tough enough? Now, the knock with James Franklin has always been, like Ohio State, he can recruit as good as anyone in the country. NFL players all over the place. Their tight end this year is a monster. He had 17 catches against USC. Their front seven is awesome. for the first time in a long time, they hire the Kansas OC. Their offense is good. Then their quarterback gets hurt last week, who was kind of a bizarre player. Last year was very, very underwhelming. Then you watch him against that USC game, which was kind of the crowning achievement of his short career. And then he gets injured in this game against Wisconsin, which was kind of getting weird for Penn State. And they bring in the backup, who's kind of got a tough name to say. It's Bo Pribula. I might be screwing that up. Comes in, actually looks kind of good. Was like 11 to 13, threw a touchdown, was running around, better athlete than Aller. And I don't know. I mean, I think this game is two similar coaches. Now, Ohio State and Ryan Day has accomplished more than James Franklin. He's won bigger games. Hell, he's owned James Franklin. So you have to give him the coaching mismatch. But like watching these two teams this year, like I don't know if I see that big of a difference. If Raiola and the Nebraska offense wasn't just an embarrassment down the stretch, like that was a very, very winnable game. It really was. And Raiola is just kind of underachieved, might even be unfair because I don't even know if he's achieved yet. But for all the hype, hasn't exactly been, I don't know, Tua or Trevor Lawrence in college. And I think there's a lot of pressure. Whoever wins, if Ohio State loses this game and you already got 2 losses, you talk about the pressure mounting up on Ryan Day. It would get extreme because then you would look around the landscape and be like, well, that Oregon is a conference loss. This is a team that's not even going to be playing in the Big Ten championship. And Penn State's the answer, like, are you ever going to win one of these big games? Are you ever going to do it? When you're the underdog, playing Michigan, playing Oregon, playing Ohio State, like, James, can you do it? And I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't bet on it. I think this game's a tough game to bet, probably a stay away for me, but must watch morning Saturday. And last but not least, it's funny. You look back at that Oregon-Boise game, which I felt like went till midnight early in the season. And I watched, I remember like, why am I staying up so late? Because I thought Oregon might lose to Boise. And it took 2 special teams, a kickoff return and a punt return, for them ultimately to win the game. But I think that game has aged pretty well. Because Boise, more than likely, is going to be in the playoffs. They have what most people consider the best player in college football, or right up there with Travis Henry. Or Travis Hunter. Travis Henry was Cincinnati Bengal wide receiver. So they beat Boise. They beat Ohio State, which is the best win of the season, I think. And then they house Illinois last week, who's good. Oregon's kind of got their swag back. And unlike, I would say, Ohio State, I do believe in their defense. Like, because their coach is a tough guy. And he's a defensive coach. So if their offense plays well, which was the knock on them early in the season, the offensive line was not playing well, and Dylan Gabriel is really kind of settled into this offense, they could win the Natty, man. And we thought that when the season began. Then like 3 or 4 weeks through, we're like, what is going on with Oregon? They look terrible. And now you kind of get that monkey off your back against Ohio State, just in the sense of like, hey, guys, we're good. We just won a huge game. We're legit. And that Boise game looked better and better each week. And then you play Illinois, and you just kick their ass. Props to Dan Lanning, because it was getting weird early. He kept, tires on the truck, kept them, in the lane, because they could have easily fallen into a ditch. Lost a game that they should not have lost. And now they've won some games. They definitely, that Ohio State game, you could argue they shouldn't even have won. And the way they looked against Illinois, I mean, that was, they shellacked them. That was a beatdown. So if I had to pick right now, I would probably pick Oregon to win the national championship.